It's Thursday afternoon, August 8th, here in Korea, live from Seoul. I'm Hyundai. Let's take a look at the stories we're following at this hour. U.S. President Barack Obama authorizes airstrikes in Iraq. He says American personnel and tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians under siege need protection. And health officials around the world continue to discuss whether the situation in West Africa should be treated as an international emergency. And Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan calls on the National Assembly to get to work on some 30 bills he says are needed to get the Korean economy back on track. Now, we begin this afternoon with U.S. President Barack Obama's rather surprising announcement authorizing targeted airstrikes in northern Iraq. Civilians in the region have been fleeing an area overrun by a powerful Islamist militant groups in recent months. Our Kani Lee has the top story.
It's a green light to help those being persecuted in Iraq. U.S. President Barack Obama has ordered targeted airstrikes in northern Iraq and airdrops of humanitarian aid.
Today I authorized 2 operations in Iraq. Targeted airstrikes to protect our American personnel and a humanitarian effort to help save thousands of Iraqi civilians who are trapped on a mountain without food and water and facing almost certain death.
The president, however, emphasized that America would not be dragged into another war in Iraq. The Islamic militant group ISIS is gaining ground in northern Iraq, most recently seizing the largest Christian town of Karkush and forcing tens and thousands of Christians and ethnic minorities to flee. The United Nations says about 40,000 of them are trapped in northern mountains. They've been ordered by militants to convert to Islam or face execution.
Women and children are being killed. We cannot get help. I have 4 children and I don't know where they are. 2 have disappeared and I don't know what happened to the other 2.
Mass killings of religious and ethnic minorities are reportedly taking place, with militants even beheading children. This, according to one Christian leader in Iraq speaking to CNN. The United Nations Security Council, after an emergency meeting on the situation on Thursday, condemned the attacks and called on the international community to support Iraq. Just in the past 2 days alone, ISIS militants with their black flags have taken over 6 towns in the north of the country. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Now, on a separate occasion, President Obama also talked about the experimental drug that was recently used on 2 Americans to treat Ebola infection. Experts around the world are still discussing whether the outbreak in West Africa constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. Our Shin Se-min has this report.
After 2 days of emergency talks on the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, the World Health Organization will announce Friday whether it considers the matter a public health emergency worthy of international concern. If it deems that it is, the UN Health Agency will urge appropriate measures to curb the spread of the virus, which has thus far been largely contained to 3 West African countries. But concerns are spreading. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued its highest alert level this week in response to the outbreak. Amid growing international pressure to consider the use of experimental drugs in combating the virus, the U.S. government is forming a special Ebola working body that will explore its options. The calls have grown louder since 2 American missionary workers infected with the disease while in West Africa began recovering after taking an experimental serum called ZMapp. U.S. President Barack Obama has so far been hesitant to allow such untested medicines to be released for mass use.
I think we've got to let the science guide us. I don't think all the information's in on whether this drug is helpful.
The WHO says that more than 1,700 people have been infected in the current Ebola outbreak and that at least 932 people have been killed. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And over in the border between Israel and Palestine, a 3-day truce expired as of 8 a.m. local time there in Gaza, which was just a few minutes ago. But before that, the Israel Defense Forces claims Hamas fired 2 rockets that landed in southern Israel. If that is the case, it would have been in violation of the 72-hour ceasefire. Now, negotiations to extend the truce ran into late Thursday in Cairo, Egypt. Israel had offered to extend it, but but Palestinian factions reportedly rejected the proposal. At a pro-Hamas rally in Gaza City, Hamas leaders said they were ready to resume rocket attacks if Israel and Egypt do not honor their demands to lift blockades into and out of Gaza. 66 Israeli and nearly 1,900 Palestinians have been killed in the one-month conflict. And rescue efforts continue in China's quake-hit Yunnan province. Workers are still shuffling through the rubble in the search for survivors. 5 days have passed since the region was first struck with a 6.1 magnitude earthquake, and the number of fatalities has risen to 615, with hundreds of others in critical condition. That's according to local authorities on Thursday. Now, more than 520 were in Luden County. 76 others died in Chaozhia County. Hundreds of epidemic prevention personnel have been dispatched to the quake zone as tests on the area's water found risk of enteric contagious diseases. Back here in Korea, the nation is getting ready to welcome Pope Francis, who will be in town next week. He is expected to deliver a message for inter-Korean reconciliation, but he is not expected to travel to the demilitarized zone bordering North Korea. Our Kim Young-gil reports on the Pope's itinerary released by the Vatican on Thursday.
Pope Francis will be the first pontiff in nearly 2 decades to visit the Far East when he visits South Korea next week. The Vatican said Thursday that during his 5-day visit, Pope Francis will attend the closing Mass at the Youth Day gathering and the Reconciliation Mass at Myeongdong Cathedral in Seoul.
Going to Korea and praying for reconciliation and peace for the Korean people has a great significant meaning.
He will also celebrate the Asian World Youth Day with young people across the continent and beatify the large group of martyrs who first brought the Catholic faith to Korea. He will find in Korea a Catholic church that exemplifies much of what he hopes for the church around the world to be, including a highly active laity. The Vatican also confirmed that North Korea has declined to send Catholic believers to a papal mass in Seoul, but said the invitation from the South Korean church was still open. Pope Francis will meet relatives of the victims of April's Seoul ferry sinking, as well as surviving Korean comfort women who were forced into sex slavery for Japanese troops during World War II. For the first time on a foreign trip, Pope Francis will speak in public on 4 occasions in English among his 11 speeches. The pontiff's plane is due to fly over Chinese airspace, and Vatican protocol calls for the Pope to send greetings to the leaders of all the countries he flies over. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And major roads in central Seoul will be closed next week ahead of the papal visit. Pope Francis is scheduled to be in the capital city on August 16th to attend a beatification mass at Gwanghwamun Square in downtown Seoul. The city's police agency says starting from next Monday, access will be restricted to some roads around this venue. And a day before the mass, major roads encircling the square will be totally closed off, including a stretch from the central government complex to Sungnaemun Gate. Meanwhile, the Seoul city government plans to temporarily adjust bus routes and subway times to accommodate the high-profile ceremony. In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Na Hyung-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. Korea's finance minister has called on the parliament to quickly pass a stack of bills that are needed to help boost the economy. He says it needs to be done as soon as possible, as the structural problems influencing Korea's economy are deeply rooted. Kwon So-ah has the details.
At least 30 economic bills need to be passed as soon as possible to ensure they don't miss the golden time of a chance to revitalize the nation's economy. This is what Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said at an emergency meeting with economy-related ministers on Friday, once again putting pressure on lawmakers who have more than 7,000 bills awaiting parliamentary approval. Choi asked for the National Assembly's cooperation, stressing that this is the last chance to put the focus on raising household income, which should in turn boost domestic demand and the overall economy. He warned there wasn't much time, emphasizing the country's GDP increased a mere 0.6% in the second quarter of the year from the previous quarter. The minister said out of the 30 most urgent bills, 18 concern the investment sector, 6 the normalization of the housing market, 3 are related to the public welfare, and another 3 on the protection of financial and private data. To fulfill that goal, Choi asked that all ministers take the issue directly into their own hands to gain the understanding and cooperation of the people and the assembly, and told them he will be closely monitoring their progress. The government's new tax revision on conglomerates and others will be subject to parliamentary revision at a plenary session next week. Since before his inauguration as finance minister in July, Choi's priority has been on revitalizing the economy by easing financial regulations, which runs in line with President Park's deregulation drive. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
In the wake of April's ferry disaster, President Park vowed to root out corruption, starting with collusive ties between the public and private sectors. And for the first time since, an arrest warrant has been sought against a member of the National Assembly over suspicions that he took tens of thousands of dollars from a company in exchange for benefits. Connie Kim reports.
State prosecutors are seeking an arrest warrant for a National Assembly member over bribery charges. Ruling Saenuri Party representative Cho Hyun-yong is suspected of taking more than $150,000 from local train part supplier Sampyo E&C in return for awarding the company lucrative contracts. The prosecution accuses Cho of taking money from the Korea Rail Network before and after he was elected as a lawmaker in 2012. This marks the first time for an acting National Assembly member to be summoned since President Park vowed to root out corrupt ties between government officials and the industries they regulate following April's Seoul ferry sinking. The president had apologized for the government's mishandling of the ferry disaster, which he partly blamed on corruption. It's common in Korea for retired bureaucrats to be hired by companies and public institutions that expect them to pressure their former colleagues or subordinates to ignore corrupt or irregular practices at the organizations. As of now, 1 sitting representative from the ruling party and 3 from the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy are under suspicion of receiving bribes. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The top diplomats of Korea and China will meet this afternoon on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Myanmar to discuss the North Korean nuclear issue. During the talks, Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is expected to call on his counterpart Wang Yi to continue trying to persuade North Korea to soften its stance on the nuclear issue. The two will also likely discuss the latest series of missile launches by the North. Friday's talks follow an agreement reached by President Park Geun-hye and Xi Jinping during summit talks last month, in which the two leaders set up conditions to resume the six-party denuclearization talks, which haven't been held since 2008. Japan's wartime sexual slavery and its ongoing lack of repentance on the issue could stand in the way of the country's attempt to gain a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. This, according to diplomatic sources at the UN, as international calls grow for Japan to atone for forcing tens of thousands of women into sexual slavery before and during World War II. The sources said the unresolved issue, which come back under the spotlight following a recent landmark visit of 2 Korean victims to the White House, will likely work against Tokyo ahead of the UN General Assembly in September. Japan is pushing for a UN Security Council reform while seeking to obtain a permanent membership along with Germany, India, and Brazil. Korea's largest automaker has been slapped with a $17.3 million fine in the U.S. for delayed reporting of a brake defect. The U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says Hyundai Motor failed to notify them in a timely manner that certain components on Hyundai Genesis sedans produced between 2009 and 2012 were at risk of corrosion, which could reduce braking effectiveness and increase the risk of a crash. The Korean automaker recalled more than 43,000 vehicles in October 2013 after the U.S. agency uncovered the issue. Hyundai says most of the affected vehicles have since been repaired. Now, the talk of the town in the film industry these days is by far Myeongnyang, or roaring currents. A number of factors are said to have helped pave the way for the movie's unprecedented success. Our film critic Pierce Conran joins me in the studio to share his views. So, Pierce, it started having record-breaking numbers there, but where is it now?
Indeed, it set an opening day record last Wednesday, which was about 683,000 viewers, a big jump over the previous holder. And then, since then, it's pretty much smashed every record you could think of. The big ones are, of course, the opening weekend tally, which stood at 3.35 million viewers. So that's for the Friday to Sunday period. And that was 41% over the previous record, just a really huge sum. And beyond that, of course, we've had the biggest single day. It was the first film to cross 1 million viewers in a day. That happened on Saturday. And then it beat its own record on Sunday again when it reached 1.25 million, which was also the first time that a film has generated 10 billion won in revenue in a single day. And we've also had, I mean, the list goes on, but we've had, it's the fastest film to reach 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and now 8 million viewers.
Wow.
And it has the highest totals in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 days. So it's anything you can think of, it's pretty much done it.
Right. So at this point, is it safe to say that it's rewriting the record book? I mean, it is certainly bearing down on the all-time record holder, the Avatar, back in 2009.
Absolutely. I mean, it's pretty much just taken the book, you know, thrown it in the trash and set fire to it. We have, it's done really, really well, and it's really impressive. But what's incredible is just the margin by which it's beaten these records. I mean, the records that were held for opening day and biggest day and opening weekend were previously held by Transformers 3, and that film is 3 years old. So things, while films in the industry have been doing very well in recent years, this just really kind of came out of nowhere and just completely just set a new standard for the industry.
And you did mention about some of the, I mean, multiple factors are being played here, but you did mention some of the negative factors?
Absolutely. There are certainly, while there's very good things for the industry here because it has been, the local industry has flagged just a little bit this year, so this is kind of good news. There are certainly negative implications, and the big thing there that people are worried about is a unique factor that we have in Korea. It's something, the industry in Korea is what we call vertically integrated. And what that means is that the main studios, not only do they make their films, they also distribute them, and they play them in their own theaters. So they're producers, distributors, and exhibitors. And so the main culprits, if I may, are CJ Entertainment, who make and produce and distribute films, and they exhibit them in CGV Cinemas, which is the same company. And the same goes for Lotte Entertainment and Lotte Cinemas. You could also put Showbox in that category. They used to own Megabox. Now they're no longer the same company, but I imagine they still have a mutually beneficial arrangement. So that means that these films that are made by those studios get preferential booking, of course. So at its peak last weekend, Roaring Currents, which is a CJ title, the biggest of those companies, was screening as many as 8,000 times a day, which is just absolutely huge, and it means that no one else even has a chance.
And that must have, it must have also been a factor, you know, CJ owning CGVs, but is that the only factor, in your opinion?
No, there's certainly more going on. I mean, the film has had preferential treatment, you know, and it's at the right time of year, the biggest kind of earnings potential of the year at this kind of late July, early August period. And, you know, I thought the film was going to do well, but I could never have foreseen it doing anywhere close to this. And so what happened, I think, first of all, the story is very well known to Koreans. Admiral Lee Sun-shin in the Battle of Myeongyang, that's something that was everyone learned in school.
He's the big-time hero.
Yes, he is. His statue is right in front of Kongbuk Palace. So, yeah, he's a very, very big name. But what's more important, what I think has really kind of driven the success, is that this has been a very, very hard year for Korea. No one's going to deny that there's been kind of a low atmosphere. Morale has been extremely low. And so there's been kind of a feeling of shame following the Seoul disaster, and it's been hard to shake that. And now comes along this film, which kind of commemorates this kind of extremely proud moment of Korean history. And so en masse, we're seeing viewers going to see this film. And so, you know, it's become an unlikely feel-good film, I suppose. And so people are just really happy to have an opportunity to kind of see their country in a positive light again, because it's been a dark few months.
So how are other films faring against Roaring Currents? I mean, we just had Kundo being released.
They're not doing very well. I mean, Kundo started a week earlier and had actually a very good start. In fact, it broke the opening day record by a very small margin, and then it was beaten again by Roaring Currents a week later. And it had a very strong opening weekend. But once Roaring Currents came, it just was completely shot. It dropped 75% in its second week, and now it's almost out of theaters. Similarly, we have the big Korean film which just opened this week called The Pirates. So that's 3 period blockbusters in a row. And this one is not doing very well. It opened on Wednesday, and its opening was roughly a third of Roaring Currents. The reservations are not very strong. It's very, very far behind Roaring Currents. And it's not projected to do very well now. But of course, with these 3 period blockbusters going head-to-head week after week, there was always going to be a casualty. So this was just, it was bound to happen to one of the films.
Right. So how long do you think the phenomenon will continue from here on for the Roaring Currents?
Well, I think it breached 8 million admissions just after midnight, and so just in 9 days, which is just absolutely incredible. And I expect it will cross the 10 million mark, which is a big figure that only about 10 films have crossed so far.
Right.
It'll cross that this weekend, perhaps Saturday. If not, it'll be Sunday morning. And then it just needs to beat Avatar, the biggest film of all time. That's at 13.3 million admissions. So I think that as early as like Friday of next week, it could be over that mark. And I mean, it already smashed The Pirates, so it's proven that competitors are not going to come in its way. So it's going to set a new record for biggest film of all time. And the question is just how big that record is going to be.
Well, I still have my ticket that I need to contribute to. I haven't seen Myeongyang yet, so would you recommend it though? I know you've seen it.
I have. Personally,
Yes.
I'm not a big fan.
Okay.
I mean, I think the film technically is strong. It's a very interesting story. I wished it would have been more about that story and less kind of hero worship. That's kind of how it feels like to me. I like Chae Min-sik a lot. He plays Admiral Lee Sun-shin, but it's not a very demanding role for him. So I felt it's a bit kind of it's kind of aping up this national pride and patriotism. And I dare say the portrayal of the Japanese in the film leaves something to be desired as well. But that is, you know, to be taken with a grain of salt. That's very much a foreigner's perspective on the film.
Okay, but you just made me not go watch a movie. I'm just kidding. All right, thank you very much, Pierce,
So my
for
pleasure.
joining us today.
Good afternoon. A hot and mostly sunny day is on tap for Seoul and its surrounding area, while the eastern parts of the peninsula and southern regions should see showers and clouds sticking around throughout the day. So it should feel a bit cooler for people in the east and south, while the rest are forecast to have temperatures in the 30s. And the high in the capital and Gwangju will rise to 32 and 31, but Daegu will feel a bit cooler under lots of clouds at 28. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 28, and Dokdo should see a high of 24 this afternoon. And Typhoon Halong has shifted to an easterly direction and is heading towards mainland Japan, as you can see. And Korea's Jeju Island and the south and east coastal regions will get heavy showers and torrential rain as a result of the storm, while we shouldn't see much of an effect in other areas. So the weather this weekend here in the capital will be typical for summer under sunny skies. Well, that's all for me this week. Have a wonderful weekend.
And that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with more at 4 p.m. Korea time.